Hey, what's up folks? How's it going? This is Waj. Hope you guys are all doing well. And for the past couple of days, I've been having a lot of fun with the brand new Nexus 6P. And what I want to do is actually a three-way comparison between the new flagship Nexus device and compare it against the two most popular phablet smartphones out there. I'm obviously talking about the iPhone 6s Plus and the Samsung Galaxy Note 5. Now, basically, these three smartphones I think represent some of the best phablet devices that you can get out there. So let's see how they all stack up against each other and see which one comes out on top, all things considered. So let's get right into this three-way comparison. Now, both the Nexus and the Note 5 actually have a 5.7-inch display versus the iPhone screen is slightly smaller at 5.5 inches, and it's about the same dimensional footprint size as the Nexus 6P, which is kind of interesting, and the Note 5 is actually the most compact of these three smartphones. Now, both the iPhone and the Nexus are identical in terms of their thickness, measuring about 7.3 millimeters. However, the Note isn't too far behind at 7.6 millimeters. And in terms of weight, the iPhone is actually the heaviest versus the Note 5 is the lightest. And the Nexus 6P is right there in the middle, measuring about 178 grams. Now, one thing I have to emphasize about all three smartphones is that there's definitely a high level of workmanship, and it's really impressive to see a company like Huawei really step up their game in developing a flagship Nexus product that comes at a pretty affordable price tag relative to these more expensive smartphones, while still giving you a premium feel that's up there with what you expect with the Note 5 and the iPhone 6s Plus. Additionally, the new Nexus phones are actually one of the first smartphones to introduce native USB Type-C integration, which is fantastic. We finally have this new standard for transferring data back and forth at USB 3.0 speeds, as well as having the ability to plug in the cable in any orientation, much in the same vein as the Lightning cable on the iPhone. Now, center stage, all three smartphones deliver really beautiful and high-resolution displays. The iPhone is actually the lowest in terms of native resolution. It's 1920 by 1080 versus you're looking at Quad HD displays on the other smartphones, and the other smartphones also are using organic LED technology, which is going to render better black levels. But in terms of sheer brightness, the iPhone is still slightly brighter, which is handy when you're using the phone outside in extremely bright conditions under direct sunlight. Now, certainly when it comes to the actual image quality, the Samsung and the Nexus are pretty much identical in terms of the level of sharpness because they both offer the same amount of PPI, about 518. And although the iPhone is certainly not bad in terms of its sharpness, you can notice that the pixels are a little bit bigger, especially when you're looking at the phone really close up. But in terms of sheer color rendition, saturation, and contrast, you're definitely looking at the best display on the Samsung side. It definitely renders out the most saturated colors with the highest contrast ratio, giving you a very vibrant and poppy image. And of course, it's adaptable. If you want a more neutral image, you can obviously adjust the display to do so. Samsung is the king of displays, and certainly this phone is a great example of why they are still the #1 manufacturer in displays. Now, the colors on the 6P definitely don't look bad, but to my eyes, it's slightly less contrasty and desaturated compared to what we expect to see on the 6s Plus and indeed the Note 5. Moving forward, a department that most smartphones tend to completely ignore is sound. And sound is pretty important. Most people do use headphones, but it's kind of nice to have good speakers. And one of the nice things about the new Nexus 6P is that it actually has two stereo front-facing speakers firing directly at you where they should be. And let's go ahead and take a listen to all three smartphones. That way you can determine which smartphone sounds best to you. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the internal specs and performance. Now, take a look at the detailed specifications of the internal specs on all three of these smartphones. Basically, the breakdown is we have the Apple A9 dual-core processor on the iPhone. We have the octa-core Exynos processor on the Note 5. And the Nexus 6P has the Snapdragon 810 chip version 2.1, which is an octa-core processor comprised of 2 quad cores. Now, we're not going to dwell on too many of the other details. You can go ahead and pause the video if you want to do that. Let's actually take a look at my benchmark results to see which one in reality is faster. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is the Geekbench 3 results. And here you can see that in terms of the single core performance, certainly the Apple A9 chip is an absolute beast, definitely coming in first place there. In terms of the multi-core processing capabilities, the Note 5 comes out ahead in that department, and the Nexus 6P in terms of the single core performance and even the multi-core performance is certainly lagging far behind compared to the other two. Okay, that's fine then. Let's see how the Nexus 6P fares against the Antutu benchmark, and we're gonna see the results right over here. You're looking at first place goes to the Note 5 at over 65,000 points. Second place goes to the 6S Plus with a very respectable 58,000 points, and the Nexus 6P is slightly far behind the iPhone, scoring about 54,000 points, which is definitely not too bad and passable for most regards. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the graphical capabilities of these three smartphones. In order to analyze that, we're going to pull up 3D Mark and use the Ice Storm Extreme test. And as you can see from the results, generally speaking, the iPhone 6S Plus definitely beats out the other two smartphones, but not by a huge margin. Certainly, all three of them are very close in terms of the first graphics test. The second graphics test is where the iPhone definitely shines. And in terms of the physics results, basically the Note 5 and the iPhone are very even in those regards. And even though the results of the Nexus 6P is the lowest out of the other two, it's still pretty good in terms of playing most of your Android games out there. In fact, during my testing phase, I actually played a lot of games on the 6P, and it did a fantastic job in terms of delivering very smooth gameplay with very minimal lag and latency. And generally speaking, even though the Nexus is technically slower than the other two smartphones, you are definitely saving a little bit of money. And in reality, for most of your 99% of the time day-to-day use applications, it's going to be more than adequate for most type of people. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the battery performance that we're getting at all three of these smartphones. Now, in terms of capacity and type of battery, they're all using lithium polymer based batteries. They're all non-removable, so you can't access the battery from a user standpoint. And in terms of capacity, the Nexus 6P actually has the largest battery of 3450 milliamp hours, 3000 milliamp hours on the Note 5, and about 2750 milliamp hours on the iPhone 6S Plus. Now, since the battery life, in my opinion, is probably one of the most important and crucial parts to your smartphone, I actually took a lot of time in developing a couple of tests to analyze the performance on all three of these smartphones. The first thing that I did is just a simple video playback test. I basically played a video on loop, set the screen brightness to the maximum settings, and had the airplane mode on all three of these smartphones. And as you can see from the results, the clear winner is the iPhone 6S Plus of getting over 12 hours, 31 minutes versus 11 hours 42 minutes on the Note 5, and the Nexus is in third place of getting 9 hours 8 minutes of video playback before it ran out of juice. Now, in terms of the Geekbench 3 battery results, you can see that the Note 5 is the clear winner at getting 8 hours 32 minutes versus the iPhone came in second place at 7 hours 20 minutes. And the results on the Nexus 6P are certainly a little bit behind the other two at about 5 hours 38 minutes. Now, last but certainly not least, let's talk cameras. Now, in terms of the actual video and photo capabilities, you're taking a look at the specifications of all three smartphones right in front of you. In terms of the highest resolutions, the Samsung develops 16 megapixel stills versus 12 megapixels on the other two smartphones. But the cool thing about the Nexus 6P actually has a 8 megapixel front-facing camera, and the other two have a 5 megapixel camera. Furthermore, both the iPhone and the Note 5 have optical stabilization built in, versus the Nexus is using in-camera software-based stabilization. Furthermore, all three of these smartphones have the ability to shoot 4K video at 30 FPS. And a cool thing about the Nexus 6P and the iPhone is that if you like shooting slow motion video, both of those smartphones can do 720p HD at 240 frames per second. But let's actually take a look at some quick samples of the photos and videos of all three of these smartphones. That way you can determine which one actually looks best to you. Now, besides all those things we talked about, that's really it for this video. I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say on which smartphone you guys think has the most to offer in terms of all those things we talked about. Certainly in terms of the internal specifications, a lot of these smartphones these days, especially the phablet devices, are kind of on par with each other. And there's always fluctuations and advantages and disadvantages that each device present, but that's the beauty of the market right now. You can kind of pick and choose on which one is the best match for you. So definitely let me know what you guys think. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video. And other than that, thanks again for watching. We'll see you later. Take care.